Well, good afternoon and welcome to Elevating the Conversation. My name is Paul Reed and I'm honored to serve as publisher of the Journal of Business. And I'm also honored that each month so many of you choose to spend a little time with us in the afternoon to really talk about some important issues facing Spokane. And that's really why we started this program, 16 months ago or so, because you had asked us for a venue in which we could have those kinds of conversations. And we had a great first year. We had folks like Stephanie Curran and Frank Velazquez and Keonta Duncan, Jim Franks, Steve Scranton, Larry Crowder, and many others talk about some of the things that were impacting us here in this community. Next month, we have Melissa Murphy with Prime Real Estate Group to talk about the Inland Northwest housing market, which should be very interesting. But today, we're very pleased to have with us Chris Patterson of a business-backed group called Hello for Good, for a discussion about business's role in the homelessness situation. What a difficult subject that is. Homelessness seems to be on everyone's mind these days and has so many causes and so many nuances that it's not surprising there's tension out there about how we actually solve it. Hello for Good is attempting to take politics out of that discussion and do some real good. This should be a very compelling conversation. But before we get into that, I'd like you to take a quick look at a video that we prepare each month to help give you a sense for what we're after in creating the Elevating the Conversation. Take a look.
Welcome to summer in the Inland Northwest. Snowbirds have returned, days are long, and boats are in the water. Whether you spend your days in the lake, at the golf course, or on the trails, it's a great time to be outside in the Inland Northwest. Of course, many of the challenges we face don't go away with the cooler temperatures. Supply chain issues persist, as do housing shortages. Gas prices are rising along with interest rates, while stock prices fall and war persists. All the while, COVID is out of the spotlight, but not completely removed from our daily lives. But here in the Inland Northwest, we aren't afraid of a little adversity. We are nothing if not resilient, resourceful, and perseverant. At the Journal of Business, we endeavor to keep you, our readers, informed about what's happening in your community. Our staff is dedicated to providing you with clear-eyed, objective information on news and trends, with the goal of helping you be more successful on your chosen path. It's time to go beyond the sound bites. It's time for more depth than 140 characters can provide. It's time for elevating the conversation.
Welcome to Elevating the Conversation. I'm Lynn Parrish, the editor of the Journal of Business, and of course I'm joined today by Chris Patterson.
Thank you.
How are you doing, Chris?
Good, how are you?
Good, good. Thanks for hanging with us today.
Oh, you bet.
Yeah. So Chris and I are going to talk for about 30 minutes, and then we will take some of your questions. Of course, there's a question and answer feature. You can type them in at any time, and we'll get to as many of them as are appropriate and that we can fit in. Chris, I think a good place to start today would be talking a little bit about Hello for Good. Could you just give us a quick what it is and how it came to be?
Yeah. So I think Hello for Good, which stands for Help and Empower Lifelong Opportunities, was created by business leaders in Spokane, and a large portion of it was due to the help of Washington Trust Bank.
Sure.
So Washington Trust hired me specifically to take the role on as a community solutions advisor and tackle the issues of homelessness, mental illness, addictions, vocational programs, everything that is, it's really hard to explain.
Mm-hmm.
People themselves don't understand it until they're impacted by either by their family or someone else that's close to them. And a lot of the things is how do we get the information out to educate people to understand what it is that we're going to try to do. The public education, the elected education, because when you deal with mental health, housing, addiction, vocational programs, youth homelessness, everything that goes alongside of it it's a very challenging topic. It's
Sure.
not a one size fits all approach.
Right.
It's
right.
kind of like a big giant tool chest where it's going to take every single tool in that chest to do the job.
Sure.
So what it was is something where the business community was seeing that we needed somebody or an entity that was going to get out there and take charge
Yeah.
and do what was right for the city of Spokane and the region,
Sure.
and start addressing the issues to hold more educational approaches, but also start to put people in positions to hold them accountable.
Sure.
Because as we look at it, the electeds can only do so much. And with everything that's happening in the city of Spokane and the region, the state, the country, it's a lot of it is going to come down to how much information, how much correct information, and what are the issues that's facing Spokane that we can address in a real tangible way. And that you need the public-private partnership to do that.
Sure. Now, I don't mean this question in either a scrutinizing or patronizing manner, but why you to lead?
I asked that question too.
Hello for Good. Yeah.
Yeah, I after I did the assessment for the mayor on the department for 2 months, I was never meant to be a permanent employee. I just went in to look at it.
Sure.
Prior to, I served in the last administration with
And
Secretary
I'm
Patterson.
sorry, to be clear, when you talk about serving with the mayor, the department, you're talking about the Department of?
The Neighborhood Housing and Health and Human Services, so or CHHS.
Okay.
So it's their Housing and Health Department, where
Okay.
Human Services Department, where they provide all the grants, the applications through HUD, through Department of Commerce, to the state, the federal areas. And after I was finished with that, I decided to, I was actually just going to go continue running the businesses that I operate and own now.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got a phone call asking if I would consider working for Washington Trust Bank and starting to address the homelessness. And
Sure.
I was shocked.
Yeah.
That a private entity wanted to get into the arena, which is so challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest thing was I was flattered. They all asked me,
Sure.
and I thought about it for the weekend. And on Monday, I talked about it with my wife and my youngest daughter. And I said, what do you think? And they said, go for it. So I decided to take on another challenge,
Mm-hmm.
which I enjoy. Yeah, I think that it's Spokane, it's your home. If you can make a difference for your own city, then why not? Because there were other options to where, I think if I can go to another state and fix other people's problems, then why would I not want to stay home and fix my own first?
Sure. Absolutely.
So I'm not thinking we're going to fix it entirely, but we
Mhm.
can improve it by bringing all parties together, where you're faith-based, non-faith-based, for-profit, nonprofit, public, private, everything, because you're going to have to throw everything at this issue.
Sure. I cut you off when you started to talk
That's
about
all
what
right.
you were doing before your work with the mayor. So what were you going to say along those lines?
Prior to that, I was working for Secretary Carson as the Region 9 HUD administrator.
Mhm.
So when you look at California, Arizona, Nevada, Hawaii, Guam, and the Pacific Islands was my region.
Okay.
Over 540 employees. You see the complexities because it is California. You've got Los
Right.
Angeles, Sacramento, San Diego. You see what works, what doesn't work, and
Mhm.
you start to realize that if our systems are that broken, or they're not as broken as we think, just depends on how you look at it.
Sure.
What can we do to fix it, and what's it going to take?
Right.
And how are we going to spend money wisely? How are we going to try to help people to make them self-sufficient,
Sure.
or to get them in a better pathway?
Sure. Sure.
So that's what I saw.
Okay. Good. Good. One of the first, at least visible or public measures of Hello for Good was a recent symposium on homelessness, occurred last week. What would you say were the best takeaways out of that event?
I'd say the best takeaways was education. We had over 240 people that registered and attended. It was
Mhm.
a very well attended event. Considering it was our very first symposium, I think we hit it out of the park.
Okay.
The biggest thing that we wanted to bring in, we wanted speakers who were going to be able to talk about what they did,
Mhm.
where they maybe had failures, what they did right, what they could tell us not to do, what traps to avoid. I think we found out through, Kevin Faulkner, the former mayor of San Diego, Rick Gentry, the former president and CEO of the San Diego Housing Authority, and then Drew Mosier of the Lucky Duck Foundation, the private entity position in their world that actually helped push a lot of things through in San Diego, was that the information they brought to the table was informative, and it was accurate, and it was factual. So that way you can actually say, yes, we can dispense with the myths and the rumors, and we can actually just show you facts.
Sure.
And that was the intent.
Okay. Okay. And have you had any feedback in terms of some of that? What was most valuable of that information?
Yeah, we sent out a survey that along with after the event to give us
Mhm.
feedback. The results that we're getting back is really good. It's compelling. They appreciated the fact that they came to Spokane to talk about what worked.
Sure.
and maybe we could adopt some of the policies and procedures that was done at those in San Diego to make it more fast track, so we don't have to go through the headache that they did.
Okay. Can you give some examples of the types of things that they did?
Yeah, the biggest thing when Lucky Duck was founded, it was founded by business owners, as Drew addressed, that, the owner of the San Diego Padres and one of the key influencers in the city of San Diego, after the hepatitis A breakout, and they had 20 fatalities from that, they had a lot of the things that they wanted to address right away. So one of the things that happened was the Alpha Project, which is, in my opinion, one of the best agencies in the country who provide bridge systems housing for homelessness.
Okay.
So their big project that they had downtown San Diego is a 300 capacity sprung structure, which holds co-ed, male, female, personal belongings. There's mental health on site, there's services on site, and there's connections to different areas to where they're not warehousing people. They're trying to get them up and out so they're not sitting there and becoming stagnant. That program was started and helped through the public-private partnership. A lot of the issues where the private partnership actually came up, they could actually show the success. They started to show the real tangible effects. But it came down to Bob McElroy, who's the executive director of it, who's a very passionate, tenacious, outgoing individual with 30 years of experience in that arena, who sets the guidelines and standards. They have individuals that are in that program that are doing exceptionally well. And I think it's a model of success. They have visitors from all over the country that go to visit it so they can see. And it dispenses with the fact that people are afraid of shelters. So if it's semantics we're going to talk about, call it a wellness center, call it a navigation center, call it a wellness improvement center, like Houston does. So they actually call them navigation centers.
Sure.
And they've cleaned up their tent encampment programs, the cities, however you want to call it. They've got a few left, but they've made a real specific point of addressing getting people off the street and minimizing and downsizing tent cities.
Sure.
So we're looking for those agencies that are focusing on really solid base, evidence-based practices who we can copy with their permission, because there's no ownership on it. They've said, look, we'll copy whatever you have to make it easier for us to do something with as less work and less painful.
Sure. Sure. So you touched on this a little bit, but what does success look like in a program?
That's always the question.
Yeah.
I would say success is based on an individual's return. How are we treating them as an individual as compassionately, as humanely, and as firmly as possible? There's always going to be rules. There's always going to be structure. There's always going to be accountability. And we owe it to the taxpayers for the dollars. You don't want to waste taxpayers' dollars to just sit there and do a revolving wheel.
Sure.
But if you can do something that's going to prevent families from getting into homelessness, then you can, that's one aspect. If you're already in that position you're in, then how do you get somebody out of it? If you just start to deal with the mental health aspect, you start to deal with the co-occurring disorders of drug addiction, then it's not going to be so easy. It's going to be a little more challenging, but
sure,
it just depends.
It feels like accountability is becoming a little bit of a loaded word. And so because we have, I don't know if you use the terms high barrier and low barrier, but when you think about accountability, what do you think about with that?
Accountability to me is, how do we help that person become successful? And then how do we help them make themselves want to be more successful?
Sure.
It's self-accountability. We can't make somebody do something.
Sure.
You cannot arrest your way out of this.
Okay.
That's not going to happen. But you can set standards and principles in the social rule of law that we live in as a society. And we can encourage people to be positive. We can encourage people to be healthy. We can encourage people to do the right choices. At the end of the day, you're going to make that choice on your own.
Right.
And then there are consequences in real life for those decisions you make as an individual. But if you can show those people that there's models of success they can follow, there's mentors we can bring them up with, that this is something that's attainable, and this is something that's real.
Yeah. Good. Action items. What action items do you think are essential, short-term, long-term for our market?
I think for our market,
yeah.
That's not an easy question. I would say that we need to get more beds online, more locations for these individuals. I think if you do a deeper dive into finding out what the individual's been through that's homelessness,
sure,
in those situations, You'd be surprised. I spend a lot of time talking to individuals individually. Tell me your
Mhm.
story. So I know that we're working on a video to tell the real story of different things, which I know that there's an agency out there right now working on that. And once it goes public, they'll put it out. But the biggest thing is
I'm sorry. So what's the video about?
it's going to be based on homelessness in Spokane. It's also models of success in Houston,
So telling the stories of
telling the
homeless?
stories of
Okay.
individuals from
Sure.
the private sector, the public sector, the individuals who are on the streets, the providers,
Mhm.
and everybody you can possibly think about. So it actually
Sure.
tells you the real narrative,
Okay.
not something that we actually believe or imagine in our head from what we see on the news or different areas that is not always going to be factual.
Sure.
So it gives you more of a tangible approach of what's going to be successful. But I would say for Spokane in general, I wished I could say we're going to build homes fast enough that are affordable for people. But
Right.
I don't see that happening right now.
Sure.
So
Sure.
we're going to have to throw everything possible, whether it's shrunk structures, um, locations for multifamily,
Mhm.
public supported housing. I mean, you name it, we need to throw it all at it
Okay.
in order to start dealing with the issue. Because as we grow as a city and a region, and we're not prepared for our infrastructure, then we're going to lose control of what we have right now, and it's going to get worse.
Sure. Sure. And so a lot of what you're talking about takes money.
Yeah.
So what's your assessment of what's being invested in homeless services at this point and what needs to happen beyond that?
There are agencies out there that do a really, really good job on their work.
Sure.
In Spokane, whether you can compare UGM, Catholic Charities, Family Promise, VOA, Truth Ministries, all of them that are out there, they're doing their absolute best to make sure. But the
Mhm.
thing is they could grow
Sure.
and they could take on more capacity. That is going to take more money.
Mhm.
That is going to be how I think people are going to have to be creative. But if you start to do things and you put things in one area, like a dual diagnosed center with co-occurring disorders for addictions and mental health, that means you're also dealing with the Spokane County Jail, and you actually need to deal with that aspect of the population to where there is a way to do a cost savings if you build the right program that's going to be able to serve all those populations in one
Sure.
area. In the beginning, it won't be,
Mhm.
but in long term, it will.
Mhm.
And then you start maximizing the relationship with the hospitals as far as Eastern State, Lakeland Village, Western State, Medical Lake. You see where they're stressed or where they're not. How can they be a better partner for us, or how can we be a better partner for them? How do we bring private industry into the table where we start talking about dollars?
Right.
And how do we maximize? Where can
Mhm.
we fill in the gaps
Sure.
that are in our systems? And how do we bring that to the table? Because Spokane is a very compassionate, caring city, and there's a lot
Absolutely.
of individuals here that have dollars that will donate to those areas, but they want to make sure that it's going to be done right. So if they give something to a nonprofit, they want to see it maximized and used for the right reason.
Mhm. Mhm. And so with Hello for Good, where do you see uh, your role in those discussions? Is it part of the financial part or more bringing people to the table to talk about solutions?
I would say it's going to be bringing people to the table for solutions.
Mhm.
How much of the financial part yet, I'm not sure about yet,
Sure.
because I really don't know what role we're going to place in that. I think our aspect is going to be directing people to supporting agencies that are really, really solid based.
Yeah.
Because once you start to see less numbers of people on the street, first question you're going to ask, well, where are they going?
Right.
So you want to be able to target those agencies that are doing the work and say, this is where it's helping. This is
Mhm.
where we can see the improvements.
Yeah. Yeah. Now you talked about the complexities with homelessness as well, and I'm just curious about some of the upstream causes and how do we address uh, some of the inadequacies that lead to homelessness.
It's a complicated question. It's
Sure.
actually, it's an easy question. It's a complicated answer.
Sure.
Having grown up in the foster care system myself and aged out in Spokane,
Hmm.
I can see the effects of the upstream aspect, such as the free and reduced lunches.
Sure.
I remember as a kid going through the system, the stigma with you get that voucher for lunch. It didn't bother me because I was going to eat the food anyway.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing is remove those barriers, put more services, enhance the services that are in the school districts. We have several school districts around here, or schools, that are so low socioeconomic distressed that they have a high population of homeless youth and kids that just aren't getting the food they need.
Sure. Sure.
That's a huge piece where if you start looking at kids who are living in the cars or living in their aunts and uncles or grandparents or on the streets or couch surfing, and you start with the elementary schools, the junior highs,
Yeah.
figure out where things are at ahead of time. Let's use the dollars wisely. We're spending all this money now. So if we were able to actually direct it in a way we could use it as a fundamental approach, the principals of those schools know really well their students' populations.
Sure.
So they're going to be key. Then you're going to work with law enforcement, you're going to work with the bench, you're going to work with the mental health professionals, you're going to work with the private-public partnerships. And if you bring all those people on the table from the beginning, then you can actually start making an impact, but that's going to take some time.
Sure.
And right now we have to deal with what we see right today.
Mm-hmm.
And while the prevention services is great,
Sure.
build on it, but now we have to deal with the crisis at the same time and try to squeeze it together so it shrinks up.
Yeah. And at some point, kind of what I hear you saying is that the first step is just numbers, just beds.
A lot of it's going to be getting resources out there to maximize the potential of what we're seeing on the streets.
Yeah.
And I think that's when you can't, when it affects your personal family, it could be your son, your daughter, your granddaughter, your niece, whatever, and it becomes personal. It
Sure.
becomes a personal conquest. You want to help that individual to the best of your ability. And once you become affected by that as a person or as a family member, you become the best advocate of something.
Sure.
That helps. It makes it, you have champions in the community who want to help push that dial. But now we have to use the dollars wisely. And sometimes there's just not enough dollars to go around.
Right.
So you have to figure out where the best improvements are going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're going to do the right way. And that is sometimes a hard choice. And I think you have to have good leaders who are willing to make the risks and take the heat to do it.
Sure. Why is it taking so long to get additional beds in our market at this time?
Costs, labor shortages, supply line, tax credits. A lot of the things that we have here are builders. We have some exceptional builders that are for-profit or nonprofit, and they can turn things around within 11 months. It just depends on how the tax credits are rolled out. If they become an exceptional builder, sometimes they become penalized because they've done such a good job that they end up pricing themselves out of the market.
Sure.
And then other competition comes in and the effectiveness or just how much the performance is. I mean, I've talked to some of the business owners who are builders who do this for a living, and that is their number one complaint is tax credit. And maybe they've done so well that they've earned a reputation and they might need to look in another state.
Sure. Are there any, when you talk about, I guess one thing I wonder about is when we talk about Spokane and these other markets, it's obviously not a problem that's exclusive to Spokane,
Right.
but how would you assess the issues in Spokane relative to other markets in the Northwest?
I would say as far as the pricing index for housing, that it's the highest I've ever seen.
Yeah.
But when you start looking at things that we can do different for Spokane specifically, I'll go back to the size we are. When we get to 600,000, 700,000 plus, and we will.
Yeah.
And we will be the size of Colorado Springs. We will be the size of those cities who went through the same growing pains. It's going to be key is infrastructure, supply, professional talent, services, all those things that are going to attract talent to come and stay.
Yeah.
Businesses to come to Spokane, stay in Spokane.
Sure.
But in order to have that, you've got to have a really strong economic engine in downtown Spokane,
Mm-hmm.
which goes along with the health sciences division. And as long as you have those two that are firing on all cylinders together, they will go tandem hand in hand and improve the community. But when one starts to slow down and the other has to pick up, then there starts to be a pass by where you're losing the supports.
Yeah.
And if people don't want to have businesses downtown because they feel unsafe, unclean, or their damages that are happening to their properties, they won't be there. They'll leave.
Sure.
So we need to make sure that we do that and we provide a clean, safe city,
Mm-hmm.
a vibrant economic city.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what Spokane is known for.
Mm-hmm. What's next for your group?
We're starting to work on our second symposium, which I think we're going to have in September.
Mm-hmm.
I'll bring speakers that we're going to focus on similar topics, but I found that it's best to always include economy. So the term compassionate capitalism kind of threw people for a loop. They
Yeah.
really didn't understand what that meant. So we had to explain that capitalism is the driving engine of philanthropy. Without economies, you don't get the donations to go to the dollars to the nonprofits. So if you can bring that type of mindset, plus you bring people here with programs that are nonprofits, whether it's recidivism or jail reentry programs or mental health or addictions, you can combine the two, and you find out before you know it, they're actually facing the same issues because they need those employees.
Sure.
And it always goes back to getting your talent.
Yeah. Yeah. Good stuff, Chris.
Yeah.
Thanks. Let's see. Do we have any questions from the audience yet?
Yes, we do. We'll try to get through as many as we can. And our first question is from Luke in regards to accountability. Who decides what the right decisions are? What's right for a business owner is necessarily what's right for a houseless individual?
It's a tough question. I guess if it's the business owner's property, most business owners that I'm aware of are very compassionate people, but they do have a right to protecting their property and their employees and the property that's on their property for their own people, for their business. And when you think about the generation of dollars that company is building for the city of Spokane, which goes into the general fund, which is then used and dispersed in different areas, a lot of that also goes to the homeless in different parts as far as a certain percentage of dollars, which goes into the safety, the security, the fireman's fund, everything that's there. So the reality of what we need to do is figure out what is best. But if you don't have a safe environment for people to come into, then you don't have the dollars to generate too. So I think who addresses the responsibility, that's going to come down to a lot of the legislation as far as laws, comes down to the city council, comes down to the mayor, comes down to the public, specifically the public, because we have a due diligence to make sure that everybody feels safe.
And we have a question from Ellen. Since housing for all homeless people has no instant solution, is consideration being given to hygienic centers for those who are living out of cars, tents, on the streets, and et cetera?
That one I don't know about. I would say that we're looking at all the solutions possible, whether it's shelter. And I know that the term shelter gets used a lot. So I think that if you call it something that's different, it's not so hard on the ears. But if you make it where there's services inside where you can actually connect people to something that makes it tangible, such as a driver's license, ID, social security card, birth certificate, those are things that become barriers to becoming independent and getting a job, getting an apartment, so on. You have to look at every aspect of every possible scenario. A lot of the things specifically regarding tents, I don't think that's the safest thing to do. Living in cars is definitely not the safest thing to do. Putting your children to sleep in the back seat of the car is not compassionate nor humane. And I think it's our obligation to make sure we do the best to try to find housing and services for those individuals as fast as possible. And that is the problem. There is a limited resource of housing. There's a limited resource of supply. And that is where we have to have the legislative body of Washington State address the issue, which then helps the city council members to make decisions. So we do it correctively and actively.
And a question from Michael. If we continue to build more housing for more and more housing for the homeless, for those needing services in our community today, how do we keep from being identified as a central hub that attracts more and more homeless?
How do we not attempt to do that? So let's use San Francisco, let's use Seattle, let's use Portland, and let's use Los Angeles as examples. You have 80,000 plus unsheltered people right now in downtown Los Angeles. It is a model of what you do not want to become. Same thing in San Francisco, same thing in Seattle, same thing in Portland. We do need to build housing. We need to build multifamily, public supported housing, everything you can possibly think of, not just for the homeless, but for everybody. Whether it's for my daughters, my sons, my grandkids, your sons, your daughters, your grandkids, your relatives, who it might be, we need to build as much housing as possible that fits for everybody's needs, not just one specific subsector or population. And I think that that's the only way it's going to improve, is if we have enough housing for everybody that they need. And homelessness is a tough decision. It's a tough topic. Makes everybody get upset and frustrated, and rightfully so. I understand the challenges. I understand the complexities. Sometimes I'm baffled by some of the stuff I see, but we do not believe that you should be shooting up on the streets in an open air market, nor should you be using the restroom in somebody's front doorstop. There is accountability. There is places we need to do, but we have to start by, there's what I would say 3 populations. There's have-nots, can-nots, and will-nots. 2/3 of that population you can address with the issues of housing and insecurity, mental health, co-occurring. That's going to take some time because our institutions and our services array are stretched to the max. So you can't arrest your way out of it. So how do we deal with that? We deal with those people that we can deal with right now, and those individuals which are hard to challenge or more resistant or have other issues, then you have to go a different approach.
Chris, but going back to the original, or to the root of that question, it sounds like you don't subscribe to if you build it, they will come type of mindset. Yeah.
No, I've seen it, and I think that you can look at a lot of the buildings and structures across the country. I think that we have a population that we need to deal with right now, but it's not just those that are unhoused. It's those that are housed in temporary shelters. You need to have the structure inside. You can't put an addict or someone who has mental health issues inside of a house and expect them to provide self-sufficiency on their own. They're not ready for that. So you have to connect them to services in ways that's going to be compassionate, structured, safe, accountable, all the above, which is not just safe for the person you're treating, but safe for the public.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the biggest thing is that's where you get the rub with different people. Well, if it was my son or daughter or your son or daughter, I'm going to advocate for the best possibly quality care that I can get for your child or your adult, whoever it is. But I believe that we also have to be stewards of tax dollars, and we absolutely have to make sure the dollars are being used wisely.
And a question from Kara. Can you discuss the approximate annual cost of taking care of a person experiencing homelessness versus the approximate annual cost of caring for that person if they are housed? We can't afford not to house our community's homeless population.
I don't have the specific numbers for Spokane. I could guess, but I think it's, from what I've read, it's cheaper to get people into a situation of housing right now than it is not, especially when there is police involvement, fire, EMS, mental health, hospitals, psych wards. So if you look at what we need to do now, it's putting people into housing in a safe environment would probably be the best model, but I don't have the costs, specific costs. I think it fluctuates.
Another question from Luke. The 2 best practices I think of homelessness response are rapid rehousing and trauma-informed care. And I didn't hear either of those mentioned in this discussion. Are we not following those practices?
That's a clinical approach. The public's not going to understand the clinical approach. Trauma-informed is absolutely the way you want to treat individuals, because as I was saying to Lynn, you have to actually understand that person's plight or what they've gone through or what they're going through as they've been homelessness or are unhoused right now. Because I have no idea what their history is. I don't know what their addiction history is. I don't know what their abuse history is. I don't know what their family history is. And a lot of these folks who have experienced some significant abuse, trauma, living on the streets is not safe. And you have to address that. So yes, trauma informed is exactly what you need to be dealing with. Each person's going to be related to only what their needs are. And I would hope that we respect that individual and give them the best possible care possible, with respects to their background. And until you get into that person's background, you're not going to know. And rapid rehousing is also great. I think we talked about that during our symposium. Rick Gentry came and he talked about what San Diego does. And he said every single type of housing possible, every single type, nothing's off the table.
A question from Victoria. The response should always be twofold: immediate and preservation. What is Spokane doing to preserve current affordable housing?
That one I wouldn't know. I think that would be, we could ask Pam Parr at the Spokane Housing Authority and the CHHS department at the city of Spokane.
And from Katie, you had mentioned legislation earlier. So what specific legislation needs to be passed to help this?
A lot of it's going to come down to, and I don't have the bill numbers, it comes down to tax structures and tax codes. So whether you're an agency who's a for-profit or nonprofit agency who is a builder, there's tax credits, which comes out of Washington, D.C., which is then funneled out through Olympia. And how we use those, whether it's a 9%, 4%, just depends on what your ratio is for what you're going into. So I think the biggest thing is just when you talk to your legislators, ask what those biggest pieces are for your community. And I don't have the specific bill numbers. I know Representative Billig and others have worked on this. I know that there's some other folks in Olympia that are trying to tackle this as well. Because I think because we're not as big as other cities, we think our issues are bad. But when we're not compared to Seattle or Portland or other places, their complexities are much more challenging. That's why I think we can deal with it ahead of time if we can get a hold of it now.
A question from Christy. Have you learned of any success stories of finding education and employment options for those who are homeless?
Depends on how you define success, because I think that's where we have employers. When I first started as September 1st, we have American Joint Apprenticeship Program, AJAX. We have programs out in Liberty Lake who are willing to hire right now 100 people. They have several vacancies. And the connection is to how do you get somebody into that position that's going to be able to hold down a 40-hour-a-week job or a 20-hour-a-week job if they haven't had one in a long time. So you have to go through retraining. And there are employers that are willing to do that, but it's going to come down to specifics. I don't have specific success stories. I know I have heard of some, but they're isolated in different areas.
And we have one last question here, but it's a long one, so bear with me here. Something that has been frustrating to see over the last 10 or so years is that we keep turning to homeless models from cities that have done a poor job, in my opinion, with their homeless situation. I have recently been traveling back and forth between Spokane and Boise, and it couldn't be more of a stark contrast. Why do we not seek out advice and processes from other mid-major cities that have done a good job? Boise has a very vibrant downtown and is exceptionally clean, and you literally do not see any homeless. Why can't we model that scenario?
We can. That's why we're looking at every city that has successful models that we can try to copy. That's why we're looking at Houston, we're looking at San Diego, we're looking at San Antonio, we're looking at Boise, and then you have the Boise versus Martin case, which is also an issue when you look at sit and lie ordinances. And that's another complexity of what you can do are the challenges. Boise does an excellent job. They're very proactive. They actually have moved their homeless population into different areas. So what they've done is exactly what's happening across the country. They do have designated shelters. They do have designated spots where they actually can enforce, and they do put people into services. And there are times when, they do have to arrest them. But that is part of the bigger picture. And it comes down to who your governor is, your lieutenant governor, your attorney general, your mayor, your law enforcement. It's going to take all those people to work with each other to make the improvement, so that we don't have people that are just sitting on the sidelines pointing fingers, because we know that doesn't work.
Chris, does visibility equal success? In other words, because you don't see homeless in Boise, does that mean that they're doing a good job with serving the homeless?
It just means that they've done a good job with moving things around.
Okay.
And Boise is doing a good job. I'm not criticizing them, but
Right.
I think what they've done is, I do know for a fact that they're using private dollars, tax dollars, federal dollars, state dollars, and everything you can think of to maximize what they're trying to do. And Boise is get used a lot but you also, it's the home of Micron. It's got some of the largest philanthropy there is.
Sure.
So you have some really big individuals who are willing to put their money where their mouth's at, and they help push the dial to make sure things happen.
Okay. Very good. Very good.
We did get one more question from Shauna. How are you involving those with lived experience in your work?
Every week. We talk to different individuals. One of our steering committee members is Fawn Shot with VOA. We want experiences from those individuals. We bring people in who are going through the situation currently, and they tell us what their challenges are, where their hiccups are. the misconceptions and what's actually happening versus what the stereotype is.
All right. Well, Chris, thanks so much for your time.
You bet. Thank you.
Appreciate it. And thank you for the awesome questions. A lot of really good ones today. Appreciate it. Please join us next month when we are meeting with Melissa Murphy from Prime Real Estate to talk about the housing market, another challenging subject for our community right now. Stay safe, and we'll see you in June.